Game theory is a foundational mathematical framework designed to analyze strategic interactions among rational decision makers. It serves as an essential tool across disciplines, providing a structured approach to understanding situations where the outcome for one individual or entity is contingent upon the choices of others. This report offers a comprehensive exploration of game theory, beginning with its core principles and components, and moving through its key solution concepts and a typology of classic games. It then delves into a critical examination of the theory's foundational assumptions, particularly the challenge of perfect rationality, and explores its wide-ranging applications in fields as diverse as economics, political science, biology, and computer science. The analysis highlights that while classical game theory provides a powerful predictive model, its effectiveness is often challenged by the complexities of human behavior. The report demonstrates that modern advancements such as behavioral game theory and the study of dynamic systems are actively addressing these limitations, allowing the field to evolve into an increasingly robust and descriptively accurate tool. By synthesizing its historical development, a topology of strategic problems, and a critical analysis of its assumptions, this document provides a nuanced understanding of game theory's profound impact and enduring relevance as a strategic lens for the modern world. At its essence, game theory is a discipline that formalizes the study of strategic decision-making. It operates on a set of core principles that define the nature of the interactions it seeks to model. The first of these is strategic behavior, which refers to the decision-making process where a player does not act in a vacuum but consciously considers the potential actions and reactions of others. This is not merely a reactive process but an anticipatory one, where each player's choice is informed by their beliefs about what others will do. The second principle is interdependence, a recognition that the outcome for any given player is not determined solely by their own decisions, but is a function of the collective choices made by all participants in the game. This creates a complex web of cause and effect, where a player's success or failure is inextricably linked to the actions of others. The culmination of these principles is the concept of equilibrium, a stable state in which no player has a unilateral incentive to change their strategy, given the strategies of the other players. This provides game theory with its predictive power, as an equilibrium represents a point of rest or stability from which no participant can benefit by deviating on their own. A foundational premise that underpins this entire framework is the assumption of perfect rationality. This concept posits that all players are rational, self-interested agents who consistently choose the strategy that maximizes their own payoff, regardless of the outcomes for others. This is a central, unstated premise that holds classical game theory together, as the concepts of best response and no incentive to deviate are entirely predicated on players being rational utility maximizers. Without this assumption, the predictive power of the theory would collapse. However, this idealization of human behavior is also the source of the field's most profound critiques and its most interesting modern developments. The full implications of this assumption, particularly in contrast to observed human behavior, will be explored in later sections of this report. Another critical element, which is a subtle yet vital point in shaping the analysis of a game, is the role of information. The phrase, "I know what you are thinking, and you know what I am thinking," is a crucial idea that informs the structure of many game theoretic models. The amount and type of information available to players, whether it is perfect, complete, or imperfect, fundamentally defines the strategic problem. A rational player needs this information to make an optimal choice, which means the structure of the game, e.g., whether players have full knowledge of past actions, is a direct determinant of the type of solutions that can be identified. This serves as a vital precursor to understanding the distinction between different game types and the analytical tools required to solve them. Every game theory model is constructed from three fundamental components: players, strategies, and payoffs. The method of representing a game, The normal form versus the extensive form is not a stylistic preference, but a critical distinction that dictates the analytical tools that can be applied to it. The players are the decision-making individuals or entities involved in the game. They can be as varied as firms in a market, nations in an arms race, or consumers making a purchase. The number of players can range from 2, as in a duopoly, to a large number, as in perfect competition. Strategies are the complete set of actions or choices available to each player. They can be as simple as setting a price or choosing to enter a market. A key distinction exists between pure strategies, in which a player always chooses a single specific action. Mixed strategies, in which a player randomizes their choices over a set of available actions according to a specific probability distribution. This type of strategy becomes crucial in games where the no pure strategy equilibrium exists. Payoffs represent the outcomes or rewards associated with each combination of strategies chosen by all players. These can be expressed in various units such as profits, market share, utility, or any other quantifiable measure that accurately reflects a player's preferences and incentives. Payoffs determine a player's preferences over all possible outcomes and are the primary objective that a rational player seeks to maximize. These components can be represented in 2 primary formats. Normal form. This is a matrix representation of the game, typically used for simultaneous games where players make their decisions without knowledge of their rivals' choices. The matrix shows the payoffs for each player for every possible combination of strategies. Extensive form. This is a game tree, a diagrammatic representation used for sequential games where players take turns. It captures the order of moves, the information available at each decision point, and the resulting payoffs at the end of each path. The method of representation is a fundamental distinction that dictates the analytical tools that can be applied. Normal form matrices are ideal for games where players lack information about their opponent's moves at the time of decision-making. In contrast, extensive form trees are essential for modeling sequential games where the order of play and information flow are critical. This distinction is the direct precursor to understanding why specific solution concepts, such as backward induction for sequential games, are necessary. The form of the game, simultaneous or sequential, determines its representation, which in turn dictates the appropriate solution concept. At the heart of every game are 3 essential elements: players, strategies, and payoffs. Players are the individuals or entities making decisions ranging from companies in competition to nations in negotiation. Each player selects from a set of strategies, choices that can be straightforward or involve calculated probabilities. The outcome of these combined choices leads to payoffs, which represent the rewards or consequences each player experiences. These payoffs drive the player's actions, shaping the dynamic landscape of strategic interaction. A central objective of game theory is to predict the outcome of strategic interactions. The simplest and most powerful tool for this is the concept of a dominant strategy. A strategy is considered dominant if it yields a strictly higher payoff for a player, regardless of the choices made by the other players. When a player is a dominant strategy, it is always their optimal choice, making the prediction of their action uniquely strong and unambiguous. Conversely, a dominated strategy is one that always yields a worse payoff for a player compared to some other available strategy, regardless of what the opponents do. A rational player will never choose a dominated strategy, and these can be eliminated from consideration in the analysis of a game. The existence of a dominant strategy provides a uniquely strong prediction in a game, as it removes the need to consider the opponent's actions. The prisoner's dilemma, for example, is a canonical case study because confessing is a dominant strategy for both players, leading to a clear, unambiguous prediction of the outcome. However, the absence of a dominant strategy in most real-world games highlights a key limitation of simple game theoretic analysis. Many strategic problems, such as the stag hunt, lack a dominant strategy for any player. This absence forces the analysis to rely on more complex and often less certain solution concepts like the Nash Equilibrium. The shift from analysis using dominant strategies to the broader application of the Nash Equilibrium represents a move from a focus on absolute individual optimality to a more conditional, interdependent form of optimal choice. The Nash Equilibrium is the most widely used and influential solution concept in game theory. It describes a stable state where each player's chosen strategy is the best response to the strategies chosen by all other players. In a Nash equilibrium, no player has an incentive to unilaterally change their strategy, as doing so would lead to a worse or equal payoff, assuming the other players keep their strategies unchanged. This concept provides a powerful tool for predicting the outcome of strategic interactions among multiple decision makers. The concept of the Nash equilibrium was a revolutionary contribution to game theory, largely due to the work of the American mathematician John Nash in the 1940s. The field's initial framework, as formalized by John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern, was largely confined to two-person zero-sum games where one player's gain was an exact loss for the other. Nash's profound insight was to generalize this equilibrium concept to a much wider class of games, including n-person non-cooperative games, without restrictions on the payoff structure or number of players. This was a pivotal moment in the history of game theory, transforming it from a limited tool for specific problems into a universal framework for strategic interaction. A key aspect of Nash's work was his proof that every finite game has at least one Nash equilibrium, even if it requires a mixed strategy. Mixed strategies, where players randomize their choices with a specific probability, become essential where no pure strategy equilibrium exists, as in the game of rock, paper, scissors. Nash's existence theorem provided the field with a powerful, generalizable solution concept that could be applied to a vast array of problems, effectively launching game theory's modern era. While the Nash equilibrium is a powerful concept, it can sometimes predict outcomes that rely on threats or promises that are not credible in a dynamic, sequential game. To address this, a refinement of the Nash equilibrium, known as the subgame perfect equilibrium, SPE, was developed. The SPE concept requires that a strategy profile constitutes a Nash equilibrium not just in the overall game but in every possible subgame of the original game. This ensures that the player's behavior is rational and consistent throughout the entire game, regardless of past events, effectively eliminating strategies that depend on non-credible threats. For example, in a game where a player threatens a costly action to deter an opponent, the SPE would be reached by backward induction, revealing whether it is truly rational for the player to follow through on their threat. A common method for finding the SPE in finite games is backward induction, a process of working backward from the end of a sequential game tree to determine the optimal strategy at each decision node. This process systematically eliminates any branches of the game tree that would involve a player making a non-optimal move from that point onward. Ensuring that the chosen strategies are credible and rational at every stage, the development of the SPE is a prime example of the intellectual self-correction of game theory. The problem of non-credible threats is a logical inconsistency that arises from the application of a one-shot equilibrium concept to a dynamic context. The development of SPE and the backward induction method to find it directly solves this problem by ensuring that rationality holds not just for the overall game, but for every decision point within it. The fact that every SPE is a Nash equilibrium, but not every Nash is an SPE, is a critical technical distinction that proves its status as a logical refinement of the original concept. Game theory categorizes strategic interactions based on the nature of the relationship and agreements between players. A fundamental distinction exists between cooperative and non-cooperative games. In cooperative games, players are able to form binding coalitions and make agreements that are externally enforced, often through formal mechanisms like contract law. The analysis in this context focuses on predicting which coalitions will form and how the resulting collective payoffs will be distributed. Key features of these games include a shared common interest, the necessity of information exchange, and a commitment to mutually beneficial binding agreements. Conversely, non-cooperative games are those in which players cannot form binding alliances or all agreements must be self-enforcing. For example, through credible threats or repeated interaction. This branch of game theory focuses on predicting the actions and payoffs of individual players by analyzing their strategic interactions. Most of the classic games, such as The Prisoner's Dilemma, are analyzed through the non-cooperative framework. The classic dichotomy between cooperative and non-cooperative games is increasingly being seen as a matter of modeling choice, rather than a rigid binary. A modern trend, often referred to as the Nash program, aims to model all cooperative behavior within a non-cooperative framework by incorporating the relevant enforcement mechanisms into the game itself. For example, the legal penalty for a contract breach can be modeled as a payoff in a non-cooperative game, erasing the distinction between the two types. This shows the intellectual ambition of the field to create a single, unifying theory of social science. Games can also be classified based on the relationship between players' gains and losses. In a zero-sum game, one player's gain is exactly balanced by the other player's losses. The total sum of payoffs for all players is always zero for every combination of strategies. These games represent situations of pure conflict where a player can only benefit at the expense of others. Examples include classic board games like chess and competitive sports. In contrast, a non-zero-sum game is one in which the total payoffs do not necessarily sum to zero. This allows for outcomes where players can either all win or all lose simultaneously, opening the door for cooperation or mutual benefit. The majority of real-world interactions fall into this category, from business negotiations to international relations. The shift in focus from zero-sum to non-zero-sum games was a key driver of game theory's expansion beyond pure competition and into complex social and economic problems. Early work largely focused on zero-sum models, which perfectly captured the essence of pure conflict. However, by acknowledging that many situations are non-zero-sum, the field was able to analyze phenomena like cooperation, mutual gain, and the social dilemmas that are far more representative of reality. The central lesson of The Prisoner's Dilemma, that individual rationality can lead to a collectively poor outcome, is only possible in a non-zero-sum context, demonstrating the importance of this classification. The timing and information structure of a game are paramount because they determine the nature of the strategic problem and the solution method. Simultaneous games are those where players choose their actions at the same time, without knowledge of the other player's choices. Even if the physical actions do not occur at the exact same moment, the lack of information about a rival's move makes it a simultaneous game. Examples include Rock, Paper, Scissors, and The Prisoner's Dilemma. These games are typically represented by a normal form payoff matrix. In sequential games, players take turns and later players are fully aware of the actions of those who move before them. This can create opportunities for a first mover advantage or disadvantage, depending on the chance structure. Examples include chess or a Stackelberg competition where a leader firm chooses its output before a follower firm. These games are best represented by an extensive form game tree. The timing and information structure of a game are of paramount importance because they determine the nature of the strategic problem and the analytical tools required to solve it. In a simultaneous game, the central challenge is to predict an opponent's move under uncertainty, which is resolved by finding a Nash Equilibrium where beliefs align with reality. In a sequential game, the challenge is to anticipate the future consequences of a move and to reason backward from the end of the game to determine the optimal strategy. This fundamental difference in the problem to be solved is why sequential games require a different solution concept, such as subgame perfect equilibrium. which explicitly accounts for the time dimension. The structure of the game, simultaneous or sequential, dictates the logic used to solve it. The prisoner's dilemma is arguably the most famous game theory model. The classic scenario involves two criminal suspects who are interrogated separately and must decide whether to confess, defect, or remain silent, cooperate. The game's payoff structure is designed to highlight a fundamental conflict between the individual and collective rationality. The payoff matrix for this game shows that for each player, confessing is the dominant strategy, regardless of what the other player does. If the opponent confesses, a player is better off confessing to avoid a longer sentence. If the opponent remains silent, a player is better off confessing to go free. This leads to a unique Nash equilibrium where both players confess, resulting in a suboptimal outcome for both, a longer prison sentence than if they had both remained silent. This is the dilemma. Individually rational behavior leads to a collectively poor result. The prisoner's dilemma is a powerful but potentially misleading metaphor. The research indicates that the game's core lesson, that rational individuals will harm the collective, is often circumvented in real-world situations when the interaction is not a one-shot game. The prisoner's dilemma has a single, unique equilibrium when played just once, which makes it a clear and definitive teaching tool. However, many real-world problems are iterated, allowing for the emergence of cooperative strategies like tit-for-tat and the folk theorem, which posits that in a repeated game, a wide range of outcomes can be sustained as equilibria. By ignoring the repeated nature of most social interactions, scholars may shoehorn real problems into a framework that does not fit, overlooking the role of reputation, punishment, and communication in fostering cooperation. The true lesson is not that humans are doomed to defect, but that the structure of the game, specifically whether it is repeated, is what fundamentally shapes the outcome. The stag hunt is a coordination game that offers a more nuanced model of cooperation. In this scenario, two hunters must decide whether to cooperate to hunt a valuable stag or to act alone and hunt a less valuable but guaranteed hare. The payoff structure is such that hunting a stag is highly rewarding but requires both players' cooperation. If one hunter chooses the stag while the other chooses the hare, the stag hunter receives no payoff. This game has two pure strategy Nash equilibria, one where both players hunt the stag and another where both hunt the hare. The stag equilibrium is Pareto optimal, meaning it yields the highest possible payoff for both players, but it is risky. The hare equilibrium is safer but results in a lower payoff for both. The core challenge is one of coordination and trust. Players must trust that their partner will cooperate to achieve the superior outcome. The stag hunt is a more sophisticated and often more realistic model of real-world cooperation than the prisoner's dilemma because it introduces the crucial problem of coordinating expectations and establishing trust. The prisoner's dilemma's problem is one of incentive misalignment, where a single individually rational choice leads to a poor collective outcome. The stag hunt's problem is different. There are multiple rational choices, and the players must trust each other to choose the cooperative one. The research suggests that many real-world dilemmas, such as climate change negotiations, are better modeled as a stag hunt, where the hare represents a safe but suboptimal status quo compared to the cooperative stag. This demonstrates that the core challenge in these situations is not just incentive misalignment, but the coordination of expectations and the establishment of trust. The Battle of the Sexes is a coordination game that moves the core strategic problem from should we cooperate to which way should we cooperate. The classic scenario involves a couple who want to go to an event together but have different preferences. The man prefers a prize fight and the woman prefers the ballet. Both would rather be together at either event than be separate, but they have a clear preference for one over the other. This game has two pure strategy Nash equilibria, one where both go to the prize fight and another where both go to the ballet. Both of these equilibria are Pareto optimal, meaning no player can be made better off without making the other worse off. However, they are unfair in the sense that one player receives a higher payoff than the other. There is also a third, mixed strategy Nash Equilibrium, which is highly inefficient as it results in players miscoordinating a significant percentage of the time. The battle of the sexes introduces a new and very common dilemma. The best outcomes are asymmetrical, and the problem is not one of trust, but of negotiation and the alignment of differing preferences. The research suggests that this is a better model for iterated real-world negotiations, like arms races where the central issue is not whether to cooperate, but on what terms. This highlights that even when cooperation is assured, the problem of a fair distribution remains a central challenge. The prisoner's dilemma reveals how individual rationality can trap both players into choosing to defect, resulting in a suboptimal outcome for all. In contrast, the stag hunt demonstrates the power of trust and coordination, as mutual cooperation yields the highest rewards, but risk aversion may lead players to settle for less. The battle of the sexes underscores the challenge of aligning preferences, with both parties needing to coordinate despite differing desires for the collective good. While classical game theory provides a powerful framework, its most significant limitation is its reliance on the assumption of perfect rationality. This assumption often overlooks the complexities of human emotions, cognitive biases, and social factors that influence real-world decisions. As a result, a modern subdiscipline known as behavioral game theory has emerged to examine how actual human behavior deviates from these standard predictions. Behavioral game theory uses insights from experimental economics and psychology to create more descriptively accurate models. Studies on games like the ultimatum game, the public goods game, and the traveler's dilemma consistently show that human choices are not always perfectly rational or self-interested. In the ultimatum game, for instance, rational choice theory predicts that a proposer will offer the smallest possible amount, and the responder will accept any positive offer. However, experiments show that responders frequently reject unfair offers, even if it means getting nothing, demonstrating that ideals of fairness and reciprocity can override a purely economic rationale. This leads to the paradox of rationality, a central concept in behavioral game theory. This paradox highlights the observation that players who make irrational or seemingly naive choices often receive better payoffs than those who strictly follow the rational choices predicted by the Nash Equilibrium. For example, in the traveler's dilemma, the Nash Equilibrium predicts that both players will choose the lowest possible number, leading to a minimal payoff. However, experimental studies show that most people act irrationally by choosing a higher number, resulting in a substantially better collective outcome. The paradox of rationality is not a simple flaw in human decision-making, but a profound challenge to the very foundation of classical game theory. These experimental results suggest that what is considered rational may not be a context-free, purely calculating process, but is instead shaped by social, cognitive, and evolutionary factors. The research indicates that evolved strategies for cooperation, which may appear irrational in a one-shot game, can be beneficial in repeated social interactions. The greatest value of game theory may therefore not be in its perfect predictions, but in its ability to highlight and formalize the fascinating deviations of human behavior from an idealized model. Game theory's core principles have proven to be versatile tools for analyzing strategic interactions far beyond their initial application in economics. The theory has become an indispensable framework in a multitude of academic and professional fields. Economics. This is game theory's original and most prominent domain. It is used to analyze market competition, pricing strategies, and firm-level decision-making in oligopolistic markets. Models like Cournot competition, simultaneous quantity choice, Bertrand competition, simultaneous price choice, and Stackelberg competition, sequential quantity choice, are used to predict firm behavior. Game theory is also a crucial tool for analyzing auctions, including first price seal bid, second price seal bid, Vickrey, English and Dutch auctions, helping to explain bidding strategies and outcomes. Political science. In this field, game theory helps to model and predict the behavior of nations, political parties, and voters. It is used to study international relations such as arms races and trade negotiations, and to analyze voting behavior, coalition formation, and the impact of different electoral systems on outcomes. Biology. Evolutionary game theory applies the concepts of strategic interaction to evolving populations. It defines a framework for modeling Darwinian competition, helping to explain the basis of altruistic behaviors and the stability of traits like the sex ratio in populations. This application is often seen as a perfect fit, as biological entities can be modeled as rational, utility-maximizing players in a Darwinian context, and evolutionary pressures provide a clear mechanism for selecting for optimal strategies. Computer science and AI. Game theory provides a formal framework for analyzing the interactions between multiple autonomous agents in a system where their decisions affect one another. It is used to design mechanisms to incentivize cooperation or deter selfish behavior in multi-agent systems. Applications include designing efficient network routing protocols, developing optimal bidding strategies for online ad auctions, and analyzing the strategies of AI agents in cooperative robotics. The success of game theory in non-human domains like biology and computer science validates the power of its core logic while simultaneously reinforcing the unique complexities introduced by human psychology. In these fields, the assumption of rationality holds true by design, whether through the logic of natural selection or through a programming mandate. This provides a fascinating contrast to the limitations observed in behavioral economics, suggesting that game theory's struggle with human behavior is not a flaw in the theory itself, but rather a powerful testament to the complexity and uniqueness of the human psyche. Game theory's influence spans a remarkable range of disciplines. In economics, it helps explain market competition, auction mechanisms, bargaining processes, price wars, and strategies for deterring new entrants, utilizing models such as Cournot and Bertrand competition and Vickrey auctions. In political science, it illuminates voting behavior, international relations, and the dynamics of coalition formation. Biology leverages game theory to analyze evolutionary strategies and animal behavior, while computer science applies it to multi-agent systems, network optimization, and collaborative robotics.